Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
This is episode number 457 with Dr. Jeanne Michele. Are men really from Mars? Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Weiner. Welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe a woman of value naturally attracts respect in life and in love. And if you're looking to gain more respect and increase your confidence and show up more authentically, I wrote a book just for you. It's called Becoming a Woman of Value: How to Thrive in Life and Love. It's filled with 30 tips and exercises to help you step more fully into your value, and it's available on Amazon for Kindle or paperback. Every week I bring you a tip from the book. This week's tip is choose love over fear. Love and fear cannot coexist, right, Jeanne?
Right.
And we often put up so many guards to love because of our fear. So if you want to find the love of your life, it's really important to work on those fears, to name them, to look at them and dive deeper into them, because often the fear of facing our fears keeps us from going deeper into actually unraveling what it is that's holding us back. And so my invitation to you this week is to really look at the guards you're putting up and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And then what would happen? And then what would happen? And really go there. And that's what I would do if I were coaching you. So I'm asking you to coach yourself and really look at those fears so you can unblock and unshield from love. I want to invite you to join our fabulous Facebook group. It's called Your Last First Date. If you're a woman over 40 and you're looking for love and you're looking to grow on your pursuit of your last first date, join us here. It's really different from most groups. We have monitors who monitor the page all day long. And so there are no posts that go off the rails. It's a place to really challenge your beliefs and help you to really open to love rather than just sit and complain about why dating isn't working for you, which is what most groups do. And it's really toxic. It creates a like almost cancerous environment for you to stay stuck. So if you're willing to grow and you want to grow on your pursuit of your last first date, join us there. And now for my guest, Dr. Jeanne Michele. She's a teacher, a modern day philosopher, a change agent, and a coach. Her coaching is dynamic, engaging, and deeply transformative. She helps individuals and couples gain the clarity they need to create powerful, intimate, and creative lives, relationships, and partnerships. Welcome to the show, Jeanne.
Thank you, Sandy. I am so enjoying getting to know you. And it's interesting, as Sandy and I spoke right before this, we're kind of kindred spirits in how we work and what we believe. So thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, I love meeting kindred spirits. And we both have a passion for healthy communication. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we get started, I always like to know the backstory. What inspired you to do this work, to do coaching and to do the work that you do today?
Well, I think it started, Sandy, when I was a little girl. I was always curious as to what caused some people's love lives to be really alive and vibrant. Like I had some aunts and uncles who really had a strong relationship. And I looked at my mom and dad and they really didn't. So from the time I was little, I was curious, and the psychology books were at the very top of the steps of the library, and my mom would go and read those and try and learn. And I think that was the beginning. And then I went into the corporate world and, had a strong corporate career, but that relationships just kept haunting me. When I worked in the corporate world, I did a lot of facilitation of management and employee disputes and trying to help people better understand each other. And I really loved that. And then I decided to go back to school. And so I ended up getting my doctorate in psychology. And then came the time for me to jump off the corporate gravy train and start my own practice. And I began working with moms with postpartum depression. I was marketing to some OBGYNs and they said, we have some moms with postpartum depression. We'd love to send them your way. And I'm like, great. And I really didn't know a lot about it. But through my relationship with these women, I learned a lot, and their husbands came to me and they really wanted to better understand their wives. And that just opened up this whole trajectory for me to work with people on their relationships. And as you know, part of it is your relationship with yourself. And how do you relate to other people in the business world and in your intimate relationships and in your family? So that's kind of a little bit of my background. It's a little bit atypical because it was a strong business background first before I got into my own practice.
Yeah, interesting. So even in your business career, you were still working with relationships. You were interested in conflict resolution and helping people understand how to get along better, which led you to working in interpersonal relationships, which is wonderful. And I love that you knew from a young age that you were trying to unravel. I can totally relate to that. As a young child, I approached my mother when I was about 16. I asked her why she didn't get divorced. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, we're living in this home with so much discourse and yelling, and you're unhappy. Why don't you leave? And given the times, it was difficult for women to get divorced back in whatever year that was, in the 70s. But she eventually did leave my father. She waited for all of us to leave the house first. And that also gave me pause when it was time for me to leave my husband, that I didn't want to just stay for the kids. I think we can, really end up damaging our children more by staying than by leaving.
And you know what, Sandy? It's still something that comes up. Should I stay or go because of the kids? And what I tell people, and I'm sure you share something similar, is you model relationship for your children, just like your mom modeled for you. You kind of stick it out. When my parents, when I was growing up, I grew up Catholic, and my mom had to go to a priest and get permission to even consider divorce. It was just a different world. But there still is this idea that couples need to stay together for the kids. And I tell you, I have worked with couples that have been separating. And when you do it well, it can be a really awesome experience for the kids. You can make it work really well for the kids. It's all about how you get along. It changes from how do I get along in this relationship to how can we get along well in service to our children.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't. And you still don't have to screw up your kids. So in my case, it really was up to me to be a different kind of mom to my kids when I got divorced, and to let them know that our relationship skills still matter, and we're going to be different in this house than we were in the other house. And they thank me now for leaving. It's crazy. It's like the one thing I was so scared of is the thing that ended up being such a wonderful gift to my children, because they have relationship skills that I don't think they would have had I stayed.
I hear you. And that's really awesome that you can look back at that and you can see how your kids are today. Very different than I'm sure when we stay in marriages that just aren't working.
Yeah, for sure. So I know you work with a lot of men, and you work with women too. And we're talking today about whether men are from Mars. And so can you share some of the differences you see in working with men versus working with women?
Absolutely, Sandy. The thing that I say to people is women will come in when they need a little tune-up. I've got this going on or that going on. Can I come in and talk? Men typically don't come in my experience, until I say they've been run over by a truck and they're bleeding. Men's urgency needs to be much higher because men are naturally problem solvers. That tends to be the male attribute that stands out the most. And again, not that 100% of men are one way and 100% of women are another way. The danger in the men are from Mars, women are from Venus is it can stereotype a little bit. But I think when we peel back the layers, men come in when it's something really important that they feel that they need help with. And in my experience in working with men, they go deep. When the guys that come into my office start to open up and realize that, wow, I can have a really nice conversation with a woman and she listens and she's present for me, they tend to be very loyal and they tend to go really deep. There's a lot of deep thinking underneath, how men show up. And I think that one of the biggest challenges between men and women are misunderstandings. Sometimes women tend to process out loud, which means their thoughts are not fully formed as they're talking about them. And women, generally speaking, tend to use more words. And so sometimes a guy, generally speaking, will process internally. So by the time they get a thought out, it's a pretty formed thought. And it's like, okay, this is what I think. And when a guy listens to a woman and there's lots of words, well, does she really mean this or does she really mean that? And then ultimately what can happen over time is he starts to tune her out. And then she feels like she's not being heard, Or men need more silence. So sometimes a guy is really quiet and a woman assumes that he's not listening. But in reality, he's thinking because he's trying to solve the problem. I don't know how your experience is with men, but that is, one of my experiences in working with, men versus women.
Yeah, those are really important points. I think that women, I've heard it said that women speak in story and men speak in headlines. And so
I like that.
And women, because men are tracking, they're trying to track, what am I supposed to listen to, like you said? And they're like, I don't know. She started out talking about going to her friend's house, and now she's talking about something at work. And I'm not sure what she needs from me. And am I here to fix the problem? Does she need me to talk about her friend, about work? I'm confused. And so often they get frustrated. And also, I think, women tend to fill in the space a lot, the silence. And it's interesting because my son is 30 and he was telling me that he's been listening more to women. And he says when he gives women space, they tend to come forward more with more information, with more openness. And he sees a lot of men trying to fill the space with women. So that's interesting too. And that's why it's important not to have these men are, women are. We have tendencies. I think our brains, the hemispheres of our brains are interconnected in different ways. And we're also women are brought up to be relational. Men are brought up to be tough. So can you speak to that? Because I think that influences a lot of our miscommunication too.
Absolutely. And I want to go back for just a moment to what you're sharing about your son. I am finding that younger men are showing up differently too. And there's a tendency to show up with a little bit more openness and desire to understand. You and I grew up in an era where men were supposed to be this way and women were supposed to be this way. And I think we're becoming more fluid in ways that, there's a deeper desire to listen and to understand, and I love what you shared about your son, because I think if there's hope there, it is hope with newer, younger people are showing up with more of a desire to partner. And I think that we who have been in the world a little longer can learn from that. I think women, especially, that have been through a divorce or been through a few relationships, are looking for something different now. And I think men are too. And I think the desire to partner and share responsibilities is huge right now. More women are working and have careers that are meaningful to them. And so how do you share that space? And I think that is something that is important to talk about, because so often women make the assumption that men think like they do, or that when I share with a guy, it's like sharing with one of my girlfriends. And that's not true. You need to ask for what you want. Like, I'd just like you to listen to the conversation. I just need to process. Or, I need some help solving this problem. Then a guy's like, got it. I know what you need from me now, so I can listen from that perspective, as opposed to, like you said, trying to track 5 different stories within one story. I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I love what you shared with your son.
No, this is a great fun to remember my question, but I think you're right. I am seeing that, and I belong to a few Facebook groups for men and women. My group is only for women. And looking at the conversations that are happening with younger men and
Mhm.
how open they are to
Mhm.
talking about toxic masculinity, talking
Mhm.
about Me Too, and how they
Mhm.
can understand women better. I
Mhm.
love that. I think, the men who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s are not as clued in, and it's more
Mhm.
difficult for them. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. Whenever I cook, I love listening to music from the 70s, like The Grateful Dead and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and my favorite, Joni Mitchell. With Amazon Music Unlimited, I can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. And you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any device, whether it's your smartphone or tablet, your PC or your Mac, Fire TV, and any Alexa-enabled device like the Amazon Echo. You will never hear or see an ad, and you can even download songs and podcasts and playlists to listen to offline. Now, for a limited time, you can get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 90 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last first date to claim this offer. Let's talk about more ways that we can bridge the gender communication gap, because I think understanding these differences
Mhm.
helps.
Mhm.
What else can we do to bridge that gender communication gap?
I have this idea that you can't heal what you don't talk about, and I think it's important to talk. I think as people are starting to form relationships, and it doesn't have to be just only in intimate relationships. I hope for all the women out there, you have some guy friends, because guy friends are going to shoot more straight with you than somebody that's trying to impress you and, trying to mold their behavior, at least at the beginning, to what they think you want. Talk to your guy friends, and talk about some of the things that are bothering you, or even in a relationship where you're starting to date too. It's like, oh, here's what I thought I heard you say, or you stepped on my toe and it hurt. I mean, we have to be willing to come forward with what we are assuming. Okay, instead of just making an assumption in our head that, oh, he said this, therefore that. Women are great at doing that. We need to put it out on the table. Men appreciate what I would call kind directness. You know, when you say something kindly and you want to understand and be curious, I think that helps. And I think going into relationship with what in Buddhism they call, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I love this, particular philosophy, beginner's mind. The danger we make is we interpret, especially as women. We hear a thought or we see a way of behaving and we interpret it to mean something. And then we respond from that interpretation instead of gaining the clarity. I think if people could ask questions, be curious, and gain some clarity by talking about things, we could go a long way to help bridge that gender communication gap.
I love that. I grew up in a home that was masterful at assumptions. And even now, when I talk to my mom, she'll make up so many stories about everybody. The doctor
Mhm.
didn't answer the phone. He must be at his home that he has out on this island. I'm not sure he really lives there, but he's gay, so he must. And I'm like, oh my God, can you just quiet that mind for a minute? And
Mhm.
just, he didn't pick up the phone. That's all you
Mhm.
know. Right.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so
Right.
we fill it all in, and we do it in ways that really sabotage
Mhm.
ourselves. I
Mhm.
see posts by women who are super anxious, and
Mhm.
I read one the other day in another group about a man she started seeing who was on Snapchat. So we can see that this is a younger person, because most people our age are not on Snapchat. But she was analyzing the fact that he didn't have the location when he spent the night. Her home didn't show up on his Snapchat location, but then he turned it back on after he left. And so that must mean that he doesn't really want to be here. And he's probably seeing other women. And what are you
Mhm.
doing? So by the time
Mhm.
you speak to this person again, you've already made up a
Mhm.
story,
Mhm.
and he's doomed, you're doomed, it's not going to work. And so that curiosity piece and that beginner's mind, every conversation, if we could come in open, curious, we don't know the answers until we check in with someone else. It is so important. I just want to underline that.
And to enjoy the process. You know, I know your show, which I love, is Last First Date. I mean, your next first date might not be your last first date, but what can you enjoy about this? What can you appreciate about this person? You know, what do you pick up about who this person is and what their life has been about? And we learn more about ourselves as we interact with other people. We see other sides of us with the person that we're interacting with. And we come in with we come in like carrying this backpack full of rocks. You know, I've had this experience with this guy and this from this guy, and I'm assuming this from that. And it's so hard to just come in and be clear and just say, okay, I'm going out to dinner. I'm going to have a coffee with this man, and I'm going to just appreciate who he is. But for right now, he's the person sitting in front of me, and I'm going to be curious and I'm going to enjoy it. I mean, worst case is you talk with a girlfriend and have a good laugh afterwards, because they aren't anything that you noticed if you found them online in their profile. Sometimes they can be very different. But I mean, we are all human beings, and we all have stories, and we all have things that have hurt us, and we all have things that have brought us joy. To just appreciate sitting like you and I are right now. I'm really enjoying speaking with you, and I'm very present to your stories that you're sharing too. If we could show up that way for the people in our lives, whether we're dating them or just getting to know them, gosh, Sandy, wouldn't it be a pretty darn awesome world?
Oh my God, yes. And I love, you're talking about being present. That is one of the hardest things that we do. That's anxiety, depression, all of those things are not about being present. They're about future focusing, past, lamenting the past. And when we can look at that person, and again, it's either it's going to be a great date or a great story, like you said. And either way, you can learn about yourself, you can learn about the other person, and you walk away a better person, and you hopefully leave them a better person, which is what I always say. It's like, you don't have to fall in love with every person you meet, but how can you use this opportunity to grow and to build on what you already know? Because most of us have come from really bad relationship experiences and role models. And so this is our school of relationships, just every interaction.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. And like you said, sometimes it's hard. So I think before you go out with somebody, you monitor your self-talk. We think between, I think it's 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. And I've read that like 60% of those are critical thoughts. So, we're already like, oh my gosh, what's he going to think of me? Or what am I going to think? If you can just breathe, which tends to take you out of your emotional process into your more executive functioning frontal lobes, and just breathe and say, you know what? And if you're part of a spiritual tradition, to pray in whatever way you pray, I surrender, I'm opening up to this meeting, and I'm going to be fully present, and just prepare. The more you can mentally prepare before you walk in, the more you're able to calm that anxiety, and really, like you said too, show up and just see what it's like. I like that you either have a story or or you have a date or somebody that you're, forming a relationship with.
Yeah, well, and you're bringing in some other great tips. And I before we taped today, your internet shut down, and so you came back on to record with me, and you took a deep breath, and I was watching you do that to get centered. That's an important life lesson, that things don't always go the way we plan them to go. And when you can center yourself, you have more control over who you are, how you show up. You're going to be more present. So just wanted to put that out there. Deep breaths, always good. Center yourself. Really learning how to self-soothe, how to center is just such important work.
I appreciate the way you paid attention to that. That shows you're good at tracking, and if we can do that also with other people and ourselves, I think it's about connection, So thank you for sharing that, because it is, life throws you, curveballs. So how do you come back to that place of center and not get stuck in the, oh my gosh, my internet went down, and it's like, come back to center,
Yeah.
and then you can proceed with a more calm mind
Yeah.
and heart.
Yeah. And connect. Whereas a lot of people are so disconnected to begin with that it's hard for them. And I was talking to you before we got on about having difficult conversations, and that being one of the most important parts is centering first. Just really being present, centered, looking in with a beginner's mind. I like to say it's like that person is from another planet. Like if you didn't know them at all and you knew nothing about them, you would come in with this like very curious mind. What language do they speak? Ooh, they have hair. Interesting.
No, I love it too. And I work with a lot of couples with infidelity too. And one of the things that is so critical, I believe, what you don't talk out, you act out. And if you think having a tough conversation when you feel disconnected with a loved one and you don't want to talk about it, and she's going to get mad, or he's going to get mad, or he's going to withdraw, and you don't talk about it, and then someone else shows up that kind of lights up your world a little bit, that's interested, there is a tendency to slip into the idea that this relationship could be better. And you don't have the conversations, and sometimes before you know it, you're acting out in a way that you never thought you would. And to have a conversation after there has been an affair is much more challenging than a conversation you could have before you're having an affair. We tend to avoid until the conversations get bigger and bigger. So absolutely having the courage to have those conversations. And like you said, Sandy, take a breath first. You can make an appointment for that conversation. I have something really important I want to talk to you about. When do you have some time to be present? You don't talk when somebody's watching TV or, eating a meal. You want to make sure that they are open to having that conversation, and the two of you enter into it with the idea of connecting and discussing. So how you set that up is really important too.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up infidelity, because there's so many types of infidelity. And often when a couple has not been communicating well, it is so easy to just look to someone else to fill the void instead of talking to your partner. And sometimes it's not enough to just talk to your partner. Sometimes the relationship is fractured, and that was the case in my marriage, where I ended up turning to someone emotionally and didn't even realize it was happening, but I had tried for so long to connect with my husband, and he just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. But the fact that I had this emotional affair was a catalyst to not only getting divorced, but also him getting help. And I've talked about it before on the podcast, but it was what I consider the miracle of my divorce was that my husband woke up to what emotional intelligence looks like, what communication skills look like. And he now teaches empathy and nonviolent communication. So he went from someone who could not have a difficult conversation at all. Like he was the king of stonewalling. And that didn't work for me. So after years of being left alone with all the stuff in my marriage, I gravitated towards somebody who would listen and who would value me. And I get it. But for me, that was the wake-up call. Like, don't go there, end this, and move on with your life, because I couldn't do it anymore.
Sorry to interrupt. Sometimes there are needs that you realize and that you don't see until you connect with somebody who can see that aspect of you, and sometimes you try within a marriage and the capacity isn't there, or at least it isn't there at that particular time in their life. I love that your husband went back and learned more about himself and emotional intelligence, and that he's teaching it. But that's also you seeing that there's something inside of you that is yearning and longing for something that wasn't there. And as you connected with that other person, what I find too is that people can come alive, especially if they've been in a marriage that has been dead for a while. And you feel when your marriage, especially for women, but I think for guys too, when there is a sense of disconnect, there is a lack of aliveness. And when you find that in someone else, it sparks it inside of you. And then you have to decide what to do with it. We can assume it's that other person. Oh my gosh, I've connected with this new person and they're this and that. No, and they might be, but really the truth is they tapped in something inside of you that needs to be blossomed and come alive. And when you can see it that way, and you can consider your options and choices, then you can consciously choose, or more consciously choose, or then, you can go back to your husband and say, you know what, this isn't working, or however you had that difficult conversation and I need a change. And if he just isn't in that place, or she just isn't in that place, then it's time to make another change, because, life is short, and the older we get, the shorter it seems. And being able to be alive and creative and vibrant is so important, whether you are in a relationship or you're not in a relationship. That, accessing that part of yourself, I don't know, I think that's what life is about. And then hopefully finding a partner who is open to accessing that part of themselves and then coming together. I tell people there's 3 elements in relationship. There's you, me, and us, and you have to feed all 3. Because otherwise it's lopsided. It's like a 3-legged stool. If one of the legs is less or broken, it doesn't stand up straight. Anyway, thank you. You created this avenue for me to go down another road. But I appreciate it.
I love how you just shared that, because that was really the thing that happened to me. I felt like I had been dead and not even realizing it. It was like The Walking Dead. I had learned to live with that version of myself, because I was in survival mode for so long. And it worked. I had good friends. I had a career. I did a lot of really interesting things. I had family, but I was dead inside, and I couldn't be me in that relationship. This person who brought it out of me was definitely not the person who I wanted to stay with. He was the catalyst. I needed him to see a part of me, to appreciate a part of me, to help me appreciate it back in myself, and to realize what I was giving up by staying. And I think sometimes it ends that way, and sometimes it's the catalyst to make your relationship work. And so but that aliveness, I would never live without it again. And it's what sparked my career in coaching. It's what gave me all this ability to step into my full expression. So we talked today about expressing yourself in difficult conversations, having these tough conversations where we need to talk about stuff before it happens, or when you're in a bad place. Just tapping into who are you at your core, knowing your essence, knowing what you need and want. I mean, all of these things are just so important.
Yeah, I think they're critical. Again, in and out of relationship, in and out of intimate relationship, because we're always in relationship. Always in relationship.
Yeah.
And you follow the thread of aliveness. There's a philosopher that says, do what makes you come alive, find what makes you come alive, and do more of that. And like you said, that led you down this path of, this beautiful career you're in, where now you're committed to helping other women, find themselves and find that essence and continue to tap into it and bring it forward. Part of it's an inner process of feeling it inside of yourself. And then once you do, to have that, that light that shines out, to others as well. It's both of those, I think.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So Jeannie, what are your final words of advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date?
Well, I think that really what we've been talking about, it's getting in touch with yourself. I like Don Miguel Ruiz, the 4 agreements, has 4 principles of life. One of them is don't make assumptions, which we've talked about. One of them is do your best, show up in the best version of you that you can in the moment. Be impeccable with your word. And I think that really means when you say something, do it. And when you make a commitment, honor it. And then there's one more. Don't take
things personally.
Be impeccable with your word. Don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
Oh, don't take
things personally was the last one.
Right. You've got them memorized better than I. And I think that when you follow life principles like that, you feel more confident in who you are. And when you feel more confident in who you are, you can step into the world in that place of feeling like you are that woman of substance, that you bring something to the table, and you enter into relational connection different than when you're in that place of fear and anxiety, as you talked about that fear, that blocks us. And then you show up differently, and I believe you attract a different type of person, and I think that, again, as we talked about, be curious, be mindful, show up with kindness and directness, and then see what opens up, and leave room to be surprised, because someone can surprise you too. Sometimes you go on a date and go, I'm not sure, but I'm going to try again. And sometimes that person, needed another date to really shine. So it's like, there's not one way to do this, and just, I don't know. I think love who you are too.
Yeah, this is also important. And I love the be surprised, be open to being surprised, because I often say love comes in a surprise package. We think we want this type, and it shows up in the person who's painting your house, or the person who has a different type of education than you always thought you needed. But it's everything that you really needed. And we don't always know what that is, because we walk in again with this fixed notion. So that's the beginner's mind. Be open, be curious, be mindful. The 4 agreements, perfect ways to live your life, and just so much richness in this conversation. I really appreciate you and the work you're doing. And thank you. And let us know how people can find you.
People can find me. There is a Facebook page that they can connect with me on if they want to send a message. I also have on my website a little ebook that I did, the 10 best practices you can do to strengthen your relationship. And whether you're in or out of relationship, they really are some tips regarding how you show up. So you can go to my website, which is livingandlovingcourageously.com, and you can get a copy of that ebook, and that can help you too.
And what's the?
So I'm open to however I can help. Just like you, it's like like I said, we're kindred spirits in wanting to help people really, forge good relationships with themselves and with others.
Yeah, and the Facebook page is called Living and Loving Courageously.
It's Jeanne Michele, PhD.
Okay, and Jeanne is spelled Geanne.
JeanneMichele. So it's 2 N's, no I, and 1 L. Okay. I spell them differently.
Great. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sure that so many people will hear it and benefit, and hopefully open their minds to just being more mindful and curious, and asking more questions, and being more present. We covered so many important things today. So thank you again.
And thank you, Sandy. It's been great connecting with you. I've enjoyed the conversation as well.
Oh,
thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you love our show, please rate and review us. It always helps. And we hope you go on your last first date very soon.